Nearly 60 million people have been displaced from their homes due to wars, conflicts, or the search for a more stable livelihood. Countries of destination are tasked with balancing humanitarian protection and border protection while attempting to tackle the root causes of migration. While Europe is currently in the spotlight with the ongoing refugee and migration crisis, more than 86% of refugees are actually hosted in developing countries. More and more countries, among them also Morocco and Mexico, are turning into immigration countries. What has to become clear is that migration is a permanent feature of our time. It is not a problem to be solved, but a situation to be managed. And if managed well, it can lead to benefits and positive outcomes. How do regions in the Atlantic manage asylum and migration? What does it mean to tackle the root causes? How do they build on the positive aspects of migration and try to diminish negative effects? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome TV host and journalist, Mr. Ali Aslan.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to the second day of the Atlantic dialogues, and I think we are starting with a big bang. Can we manage migration and asylum policies in times of humanitarian crises? And I think it's become abundantly clear, even throughout yesterday's discussion, that the issue of refugees and asylum seekers was always omnipresent, regardless whether we talked about prosperity or we talked about security. This topic, the topic that we're going to deal with now, was never far away. And I think all of you, when you woke up this morning, at some point you looked at your iPhones and checked the latest news, and I bet there was one piece at least on the subject matter that we're going to talk about today. And I'm very happy to welcome an extremely esteemed and experienced panel. For one, we have the former Moroccan ambassador to the US. He served in that position for almost a decade, and he's now a senior non-resident fellow at the OCP Policy Center. Please welcome Aziz Mekouar. I'm also very happy to welcome the former Foreign Minister of Mexico, who's currently a professor of politics and Latin American and Caribbean studies at New York University. He's also a member of the Board of Human Rights. Ladies and gentlemen, Jorge Castañeda. And last but not least, I'm very happy and delighted to welcome to the stage the Chief of Staff to the President of the German Federal Office for Migration and Refugees. She's been holding this post since 2012, an extremely important post. You know that Germany is very much at the forefront of this discussion. Please welcome Katrin Hirseland. And Katrin, I want to start with you right away. Angela Merkel said the by now famous German words, "Wir schaffen das." Wir schaffen das, in English, we'll handle it, we'll manage this refugee crisis, we will succeed. Now, we've heard about the polls yesterday that came out. Slowly but surely, the German people seem to be running out of patience when it comes to this issue of migration. You are dealing with this issue on a daily basis, Katrin. What is your mood? Is Germany going to handle it? Is it going to succeed?
I'm tempted to say yes, we can, but I'm not going to use that phrase. Well, I just did. I think we can indeed, but we need to look a bit closer at the situation. It's not so much the number of people coming in, I think that's the problem, but it's the speed of people coming in. Last year we had about 200,000 asylum seekers in Germany, and that was already a large plus. This year we're going to be looking at around 800,000, and the majority of them started coming this summer. So in the last 2 months, 10 weeks, we had an enormous influx of people. Currently we're looking at about 10,000 a day crossing the border into Germany as asylum seekers. I'm not talking about any other kind of migration. So I think we can, but there are practical issues at hand that we need to look at very quickly. Shelter is one that's very important. Just basic shelter we're talking about. We're not talking about long-term housing at this point. And that's a new situation for us. The speed and the amount of people just bring new challenges with them. And I think one important point is that we need to have an honest discussion with the people on the ground. Yes, we can manage that, but there will be challenges, there will be difficulties. It will mean certain things for you at home in your local municipality. Things will change. They can change for the better, but we need to make sure that they will not change for the worse. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, and of course we will get into more detail, of course, as the discussion goes on, a discussion that you are obviously very much welcome to participate. You know the drill. Send in the questions or raise your hand throughout this discussion. We'll try to get in as many as we can. Germany, of course, a very critical issue these days. Let's switch continents here for a change. Jorge, Castañeda, as you know, there are a couple of presidential candidates running. I'm sure that's caught your attention. One of them, Donald Trump, of course, who said a thing or two about Mexican immigrants coming to the United States. I want to give you the opportunity and this floor to respond to him.
Well, respond to him. I'm not sure he's listening, but I'm not sure he listens to anybody, by the way.
No.
But certainly.
Well, this will be streamed live, so I'm sure he's sitting at his laptop right now as we speak.
I mean, he has created a very difficult situation for Mexico because he continues to generate an enormous amount of hostility towards Mexico, towards Mexican migrants. He wants to build a wall. He wants us to pay for the wall. He wants us to build the wall. He wants us to dig under the wall and climb over the wall. He wants us to do everything. And he is not getting the pushback from his Republican colleagues that he should. Some of them every now and then do. Jeb Bush has a couple of times, but most of them go along with this. And that means that even if he's not the nominee, he will drive the Republican Party in the direction of a very anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican posture. Now, this is especially difficult for Mexico because while we are a country that still generates a lot of immigration to the United States, we are also a transit country, not for migrants only, but for refugees from Central America. And this is a very delicate question because if you see the Central American children as migrants, well, it's very easy just to deport them, throw them out, and what the hell? Who cares? But if you see them as people fleeing a war-like situation in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, then you can't throw them out. So what the Americans have done is to have pressured the Mexican government into having us do the deportations, because since we have no rule of law in Mexico, we don't have to give them a hearing. The Americans have to give the children and the refugees a hearing. We don't have to in Mexico. We can do whatever we want. And that's not very nice. So we're placed in a very, very difficult and uncomfortable situation. But just to give you an idea, and I'll stop here, more people died in El Salvador during the months of July and August of this year through gang warfare than at the peak months of the Civil War in the 1980s and early 90s. Far more people. So which is more of a war-like situation? The wars of Central America in the 80s or the violence today?
So certainly many points you have raised here, even in this brief statement. I'm sure we'll get some more. But very interesting, you said the transition that Mexico has been undertaking. Perhaps we shouldn't overstate it, but certainly from becoming a country of origin to becoming a country, not perhaps of destination, but certainly transit, is one that should be taken note of. And Aziz, of course, Morocco itself has been undergoing some changes, long known as a country of origin. Now becoming more and more a country of destination for many people, particularly from West Africa. Give us a sense for those in the audience who might not know about the situation here in Morocco.
Well, basically, you're right. Morocco was a country of origin for many, many years. Many, many years, and we have many Moroccans in Europe and elsewhere. And in the last few years, we have seen Morocco becoming really a country of destination and not a country of transit like Mexico. Meaning that we had many immigrants coming from West Africa, and those migrants were in a totally irregular situation. His Majesty King Mohammed VI in September 2013 gave instructions to prepare a new policy for immigration. So there is a strategy. And this strategy was to solve the problem of people who were requesting asylum status, We had also a policy to regularize the irregular migrants that were here. And then a whole set of measures to integrate these people. Because that's a problem that happened in Europe, in many countries in Europe, was the problem of integration. So the numbers, I think it's about, I have the numbers here if you allow me, but for instance, for asylum, we regularized, 578 people got the asylum, they were status. 28,000 people got regularized. And we have a whole strategy to do that. I think there is an interesting fact, is what the integration fact. And the integration fact is what we do to have these people live normally in the country, to benefit from all the benefits that we give to Moroccans. We are, of course, allowing them and encouraging them to go to schools, to get the education, the normal education, health, sports. We manage, we accompany them to organize them. So this is what has been happening lately. It's a completely different situation from the 90s, for instance, because in the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, Morocco was really a transit country. We had problems, of course, with Europe. We did become the guardians of the European, of Europe, but I think that we had all these people coming in. King Mohammed VI saw that it was a reality, and we had to tackle that reality. Now, another interesting thing is we are encouraging these people who are here to bring other people to go to universities, to fulfill jobs that we need here, and we don't have the people for them. So I think it's a positive and proactive policy. And we didn't wait to have the problems that exist in other countries to tackle them.
So three very, well, not so different experiences, I would say, but certainly three distinctive experiences we've heard from the Mexican, German, and a Moroccan point of view, which once again clarifies and symbolizes that this is not a European, not a Latin American, certainly not a North African issue. This is a global phenomenon which we all have to deal with. I think that has become abundantly clear throughout yesterday's discussion, also when we talked about prosperity and security. Now, I know it's early in the day, but still send us your questions. Looking at the wall, no questions yet. I think still digesting the breakfast, but we are off to a good start, I would say. And Katrin, let's get back to the European experience here for a change, because we've had some people in the audience who said very proud of what Europe has done. Then again, we've had a French journalist who stood up and said, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Turkey has been taking in 2 million people, and you're whining and complaining about 600,000-700,000 people." As far as EU solidarity is concerned, particularly when we look at some Eastern European countries, are you disappointed and surprised?
Well, I'm not a politician, so I'm a practitioner, really. I think, again, I'm coming back to the speed, really, of people coming in, and that speed is a challenge to any country en route to a destination country, I would say. So we all have our different challenges. I think there are different ideas and concepts on how to deal with those challenges in a more welcoming or a more not so welcoming way. But I leave the diplomatic answer in terms of political responses to the politicians. In terms of practical responses, it is not easy to handle if 10,000 people cross your border on a given day. There's issues of how do you house them, how do you get them into their final spots of destination. And if there are unilateral actions in terms of closing borders or in terms of bringing people very quickly to the next border, then of course that for us as an agency who deals with refugees poses practical problems.
Now I know there is obviously a great deal of expertise and competence on this panel that has been very clear, but I also know there's a lot of expertise and competence in the audience, particularly when it comes to this issue. So since it's a shy audience this morning, I will look around. Where is Astrid? Where is Astrid Siebert? There. The person in charge of migration at the German Marshall Fund, and of course I want to give her a chance. We have a microphone for Astrid. Astrid, do you have a question or a comment to the audience? To the panel.
Lots of them, actually. But I'll limit it to one and also give the opportunity to others. My question would be to Mr. Castañeda. We're in a situation now in Europe where our Chancellor Merkel goes to Turkey, and we are faced with trying to figure out how to handle the situation, how to get third countries involved, which is very similar, I would say, also to the situation with the United States and Mexico. Are you watching this very closely? And we have also seen with the unaccompanied minors crisis that there were, some call it negotiations, others call it pressures from the United States on Mexico, and I would love to get your comments and similarities on that.
Well, I think it is a very similar situation in that my understanding of what Chancellor Merkel did when she went to Turkey a couple of weeks ago was to try and convince the Turks to help in the Syrian refugee crisis, not only by taking in 2 million refugees, but to control the flow of additional refugees. And in exchange for that, she offered resources and even a softening of the conditions for negotiations for accession, and perhaps a visa waiver for the European Union. When the United States asked us a year and a half ago to help them with the unaccompanied minor crisis on the Mexican-US border, of unaccompanied minors coming from Central America to the US. It was 50, 60,000 in a very short period of time. It's a lot of people, not as many, but a lot. The Americans offered us nothing. We didn't ask for it either. That's the way our government works these days. So the Americans offered the Central Americans something. Vice President Biden offered $1 billion over 3 years for the 5 countries. This was a year and a half ago. Congress cut it down first to 800, then to 600, but hasn't even approved the 600. Now, if you do the math, 600 million for 5 countries over 3 years, you're not talking about a lot of money. And that's just for the Central Americans, nothing for us. So there's a huge difference between the approach that the Europeans are taking with Turkey and the one that the Americans took with Mexico on the one hand and Central America with the other. But it's also true that the Turks are not going to just do this because the Europeans asked for it. Whereas, unfortunately, my government decided to do it in exchange for nothing.
Astrid, your question has certainly opened up and warmed up the crowd, because ever since you posed the question, I've seen a lot of people. Before I get to them, we had a nice comment from a Donald Trump friend here, Arturo Sarukan. Let's have that up. I thought that was very poetic and eloquent. Where is that? From the questions and comments, go down. There it is. Arturo Sarukan said, Donald Trump is a walking fact-free zone, Teflon-coated to hard data, whose lips are as loose as his facts. Now, since he's watching, this is something that I think the message hit right where it was intended. We have somebody from the United States here who was kind enough to speak during one of the breakout dinners yesterday on this very issue. So perhaps we can have a microphone here as well.
I'm Seth Stoddard. I'm an Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security in the United States. And a question for Katrin on the Syrians. I mean, the United States has taken in an extremely small number of Syrians to resettled into the United States. I think the number is up 1,500, I think, last year. The president has promised to take in 10,000 Syrians over the next fiscal year. But one of the things that is slowing the process is the concern in the United States with regard to terrorism. And I can tell you, I mean, from the Homeland Security Department's perspective, I mean, the population of people coming in from Syria, or really almost any refugee resettlement population, is among the most vetted population of any migrants into the United States. And that, you know, it can take right now, as of 18 to 24 months, to vet somebody to come into the United States, which we are working on to sort of shorten that process. But the political reality in the United States, I mean, everything from the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee talking about the refugee resettlement process being, quote, a pipeline to jihad. The political dynamic in the United States, and this is not going to change. And I guess the question is to Katrin in terms of what's the politics and the reality in Germany with regard to much larger numbers of people coming from Syria, and are people concerned about the threat of terrorism from this flow?
Do you want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Directly? Sorry. Basically, we have two different ways or two different groups of Syrians coming into Germany. We have asylum seekers who made their way across the ocean or the Western Balkans, very difficult. And we have about 35,000 people who actually came to Germany on a humanitarian resettlement scheme. 20,000 by the national government, 15,000 by the 16 federal states that we have. For those in the humanitarian resettlement scheme, we have a very thorough security check, which I will not go into detail here, but we can do that bilaterally if you want to. And of course, that's a major concern in general with all asylum seekers coming into the country, or the EU, I guess I can say. So we do have a thorough security check. When it comes to asylum seekers, security checks are part of the admission process. So far, I don't think, well, I'm not going to say we've been lucky, because that's not the right term to say, but so far we have not had any major difficulties, let me put it that way. And I hope that the mechanisms we have installed will ensure that that will stay that way. But we can maybe go into that bilaterally in a bit more detail, because of course the details of that I cannot, make public. It's very political, and it's very much an issue of public debate as well, because as Ali said earlier, our public opinion seems to start shifting, and security and terrorism, of course, is one part of the public fear, let me put it that way. And it's very important that we have a political response on that, and I think to this point we do have a political response to that. But with the numbers continuing as high as they have been, and part of people crossing the border unregistered, of course, that is an issue. I cannot deny that.
So a lot of information will be shared bilaterally, obviously. So I see a lunch date coming up later. Go ahead. There's a lady to my far right. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Halima Jundi. I'm from the Emerging Leaders Program. My question is to Ambassador Mekouar. Is there a role that Morocco and other stable Arab countries would play to ease the Syrian refugees crisis? Thank you.
Well, we have given asylum to a certain number of Syrians who came to Morocco. So this is what we did here in Morocco. Now, what's happening in other countries, we cannot do anything on it with it. We are managing the situation that we have here in Morocco, and I think I can give you the numbers that I have. About the number of Syrians that it's 492 Syrians got the asylum here, which is because this is the numbers that we that we received and the requests we have received. I would just wanted to add something. I think I didn't give the right number. When I spoke first, it's 100,000 people that have been regularized in the country. 30,000 are irregular, more or less. 28,000 are going to be regularized. This is a country, this is new for Morocco, and we're doing it.
So a lot of people have been raising their hands. This gentleman from Germany, if I'm not mistaken, who proudly proclaimed yesterday that he's very proud of the accomplishments on the part of Europeans when it comes to handling the refugee crisis. Let's give him a microphone, and perhaps he can clarify his statement from yesterday.
I'd like to move beyond my statement of yesterday. Germany is about to accept roughly 1 million people this year. There might be another million next year. By the time this is all done, there's going to be a few million new German citizens that are going to be walking in the country. I saw from your profile that you are an intercultural learner. I've been involved as a trustee for a large intercultural learning organization for many years, and we know from the work that we've done since the end of the Second World War, typically we have about 15,000 kids a year going through our programs, that the way to integrate people is to, as quickly as possible, drop them in the host community, away from whatever their home community was like. Putting refugees in large camps, putting refugees in hostels where they live together with other refugees slows down that process. Scattering refugees in towns and villages, and as much as possible helping them to integrate, perhaps by living for a few months with a German family, will facilitate that process. Now, this is a scientific insight into how intercultural learning happens. It is not a political insight. My question to you is, how can the political decision makers provide the leadership to get the population to understand that not only is this necessary, but it is enjoyable, it is fun, and it will lead to a much better tomorrow for all concerned?
Good.
A two-step answer I have. I think we need to differentiate between the first few months, people are still in the asylum procedure, and you don't know yet whether they're going to be able to stay or not. During that time, I think community housing or larger housing environments are probably the most practical way to go. But it is very important indeed that once it has been decided that they will stay in Germany for, or any country really, for a longer time or forever, that in fact a close interaction with the local municipality happens. And that is why a lot of individual housing is given to the people after they've been admitted. Germany, being a federal state, is a bit tricky when it comes to the issue of asylum and integration because there's a division of tasks, and housing is is a task of the 16 federal states, and they're all regulated differently. But in the last couple of months, what we've seen is that there's a growing number of private initiatives giving individual housing or rooms with families to refugees. And I think those are just incredible initiatives, and maybe we have to have a closer look at them and think about whether we can support programs like that on a larger scale. Absolutely.
Thank you. I don't want this debate to focus solely on Germany, of course, but I do want to take in Mekouar Dieng, who says, has Germany opened its borders mostly for humanitarian reasons or for the economic opportunities? I think, where's Mekouar? Where's Mekouar? I think he's tweeting from his hotel room. There he is. No, there he is. Sorry about that. So are you referring to the demographic challenges of Europe? And go ahead, please. So I'm trying to understand the question.
Je peux parler en français. Can I speak in French?
You can. I won't understand you, but I'm sure many of the people here will, and you have my blessing. Go ahead. Don't say anything bad about me. Go ahead.
Je parle en français alors.
Yeah.
Enfin, c'est une question qu'on.
It's a question that we ask ourselves. I'm coming from Senegal, and the question on refugees is of high concern for the Senegalese people in general, even if we're not immediately affected. The question is, does Germany admit these refugees because they find economic opportunity in behaving that way? As Mrs. Katrin said, there are academic profiles in the refugees which may be very interesting. So it would be a good thing to know if there are true economic reasons for Germany to accept these people.
Well, sort of. I just need to know what the sous is. Then I can answer.
The sous would be...
Okay, thank you. My answer to that would be, if you're asking about this summer, the situation this summer, then the German response was humanitarian. But of course, it's not only refugee migration. We're looking at mixed migration, really, if we're truly honest. And mixed migration always means people not only coming because they're fleeing for reasons of political persecution or anything of that matter, but also because they're looking for a better life in Germany or in the EU. So if we look at that mixed migration, I think we need to be very careful not to mix up refugee migration and other types of migration, but that's just a side sentence. Germany has started to look at refugees very closely in terms of the labor market, but not, and I think that is very important, whether you are a resource for the German labor market plays absolutely no role when deciding about your application for asylum. Because we're talking about protection here, we're not talking about what is your qualification. Once you have been granted protection in Germany, what your qualification is becomes very important because we need to know what it is, we need to know, do we need to school you further, and we need to sort of look at, is there a matchmaking process in place in the labor market? And the German National Labor Agency has started a number of programs targeting refugees. Also looking at, in my office as well, at language for the workplace. So I think it's an important issue, but we need to be careful not to mix the two. We have humanitarian migration and we have labor migration, and there are two different ways of entry into the EU or Germany.
Many people in the audience have been very kind and patient with me. They've been raising their hand for quite some time. I'm not overlooking any of you. I will get you in as the discussion continues. This gentleman has been one of the first to raise his hand. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Rodrigo Oliveira. I'm from Portugal, from the islands of Açores, a little bit more to the north. I would just like to raise the issue of multilateral, multi-level governance. Of course, when we think on the migration issues, we think on national, European, or international cooperation or issues, but we need to have an integrated approach on the regional and local level. Regions in Italy, regions in Greece, are the first ones to have this approach to a humanitarian emergency. On a second level, when you think on integration, medium, long-term integration, we're talking on regional competences in health, in education, and giving employment. When you think on preventing the roots of the migration issues, we're also talking on subnational authorities and its competence on cooperation, cross-border, transnational. So to give an adequate and a proper approach to this issue, we definitely need to empower regions with the resources that they need. Because you think on south of Europe, you think on the crisis that we suffered, we think that the regions and local authorities has been cut down the resources and financial and all the means to tackle this crisis. So definitely we need an international, European, but also a local and regional subnational approach to this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perhaps you want to pass on the mic to the lady right behind you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. My name is Anna Wittenberg. I work for the German International Corporation. And I just wanted to get back a little bit to the Moroccan context and with a question to you, Ambassador. So I think it was quite interesting. You presented to us the new strategy of Morocco and its efforts this country is doing to build up a real integration policy with some laws that are being on the way that will be voted very soon on asylum and migration and on human trafficking. So I think there's a huge change of paradigm Morocco is doing, and it's a very interesting experience, especially here in the region, because it's the first country in Africa, as far as I understood, which will have a proper asylum system very soon, hopefully. So the question to you now is, if you hear all these experiences and you see a country like Germany, which is struggling a lot, and Europe, which is struggling a lot, of integrating people and of managing the situation, aren't you afraid a little bit if Morocco is doing all these efforts and is so innovative to become too attractive, maybe, for this continent, for migrants?
Well, at the same time that we are doing all what we have been doing, we are also trying to manage the flow of migrants, irregular migrants to Morocco. Human trafficking, human, smugglers of humans, and so we are, of course, doing the two things together, trying to integrate as much as possible, not as much as possible, integrate the people that we have here and our brothers coming from West Africa, but also, of course, controlling our borders. So we are doing the two things. Not just to be able to manage as we want the immigration issue. Now, going back to what you were saying about what's going on, and I think that the experience in Germany is absolutely amazing. This thing of integrating people, bringing people to families and private initiatives. I think that that's very important. The most important thing is to have the people who are immigrants who are in the country feel as part of the fabric of the country in a medium term. Just an experience, when I was in Italy, I was ambassador to Italy in the end of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s, and they used to go all around, to travel around Italy and go and meet with the mayors of the cities. One day I arrived to a city and the mayor was very happy, and I said, "Why are you happy?" And he said, "Well, my population is growing." And I said, "Why?" And he said, because of your Moroccans." So all around the country, mayors were telling me that they wanted to give housing and integrate people, give them houses. I said, "Okay, perfect. You give them houses, but spread them out." they have to be a minority, whatever they are, in order that their children will become part of the fabric. And this is very important. You have to make people, to integrate people. You cannot put them in ghettos, because this is the recipe for the problems that we see today in Europe.
Jorge Castañeda, let's stay right with Ayub Mamdouh. Ayub Mamdouh says, how can we address fears and concerns fed by populist politicians about the risk of unemployment and the fiscal burden supposedly created by refugees and migrants? We started out with Donald Trump, but of course no country is immune from rebel rouses and from politicians trying to tap into the subject matter negatively, if you will, for their own political gain. You've been in power, you've been in charge. What do you make of the rise of far-rightist elements?
I mean, in Europe it's mainly the far right, and the United States also. It's a real issue because the facts are different, but it's very difficult to make a factual case to explain to people, for example, in the United States, that even undocumented Mexicans in the United States do pay taxes. As a matter of fact, they are paying much more into the system than they're receiving from the system. In the case of refugees, of course, in the short term, it's a huge cost for a country like Germany, but in the long term, people who are settling in the country can change the demographics of a country, can change the profile of the country, and over the long term, particularly as in the case of many Syrians who seem to be rather well educated, or higher levels of education, let's say, than Mexicans who go to the United States, it can be a huge plus. But how do you make this case when you have the wackos, the crazies out there saying all the nonsense that they say with no regard for the facts whatsoever? Well, you have to become a populist in the sense of the message, of the way you get the message across. Even if you can't become a populist as far as the content is, you have to make the case. You have to go out and say. And this is again the problem in the United States. Even the Democrats are not really pushing back at Trump. They're not, and the Obama administration does it only rarely. The president himself, the vice president, they're not really taking the case to the American people. Like, in a sense, Chancellor Merkel is, but she hasn't necessarily fared very well in her attempts to do so yet. Hopefully she can change opinion. But if you don't take the fight to the people, you're going to lose it. Because the other guys, the bad guys, are totally unscrupulous. That's what makes them bad guys.
Aziz, you wanted to jump in?
Yes, I would like to add something, and I agree with you, Professor Castañeda. It's a lot about perception. And I think that our friends from the media are kind of responsible for this, and also the politicians are not using the media to reach out to the people and explain to the people exactly what the reality is. If you look at the media, what has been happening for the last few months, you can see what does the media show. They show, overcrowded islands. They show flows of people. You have the impression they have millions of people coming in. And it's not millions of people. Now we have the facts. Well, in America there is a habit, especially during the elections, is to put ads on televisions. Do it. Because there are the facts, there are the numbers. When you talk about immigration, when you talk about displacement, in the last 15 years, in the last 10 years, we've had something like 15 conflicts, 3 in the Middle East, 10 in Africa, 3 in Asia, and about 14 million people have been displaced, 14 million. We're talking about, today, we talked about 160,000 people. Today, we're talking about maybe 1 million people. But if you compare it to most of the displaced people go to the neighboring countries. They don't come to Europe. And these people have to know it, because what's happening now is that the politicians, normal politicians, are dragged into the extreme right and the populist speech. We have to counter that, and I agree 100% with Professor Castañeda. You have to reach out to people, use all the tools that the others, the populists, and especially the extreme right is using. Put ads on television, speak, and explain the facts. Give the facts, give the numbers.
Before I want to give Katrin Hirseland also a chance to jump in, the distorted image of this crisis, these refugee issues in the media has been criticized. Now I know, how many journalists are in the room here? Let me see. 1, 2. I know there are more they're hiding now, of course, after this criticism. They're like, time for a coffee break.
We can
no, but I do
Germany.
want to give one of them, whoever wants to take on as a journalist, to exactly address this very issue. Is the media really playing such a destructive role when it comes to shaping public opinion on this refugee issue? Where is the brave journalist who wants to take that on? Okay.
Too early for journalists.
On that note, I think obviously there is something to the point. And Katrin.
I think it's very interesting that it's 3 different countries, but we have a very similar experience in terms of what you just stated and you just stated. I think, though, we're not talking about the far right any longer, at least when it comes to the EU. We're talking more and more about the middle ground, really. If I look at Germany, very scary to me, what's happened there in terms of demonstrations of the not so far right, the far right as well, but moving more towards the middle. If I look at France, the UK, and from our experience, we've sort of tried to go the information route of things. We've put out all the information there is. We have data without end. But I think our experience is, and it's probably similar in other countries, you need to reach out to the hearts and bellies of people, so to speak. If we all in here, we have the information, and we have easy access, and we can deal with information, but we're looking at a different group of people that we need to get to. And our feeling is that you need to bring the people in touch with the people coming in, so to speak. And that goes close to what you said earlier. And there's different ways to do that, but it's difficult to do that with the large number of people coming in, A, and B, the growing number of people being very skeptic about what's happening and having their own personal fears. And they might not be very right-wing, but they might just see, I'm unemployed, what's going to happen to my chances to get a job if there's 1 million people coming in who are not very skilled, maybe. A lot of them are skilled, but there's sort of a mixed population. And we have not yet found the master plan to address these issues, really. We've found new alliances, new partners in reaching out to people. But if anybody in here has the master plan on how to reach out to people who do not want to be convinced, I'm talking about those who are hard to get to, I'd be happy to hear that plan, really.
And I think your point about the so-called middle ground that is becoming more and more vocal is well noted. I still remember a time when the hatred that is being spewed online was disguised by an anonymous name, such as Captain Future. Now, not so more. People are voluntarily and willingly underlining and signing these hatred-filled remarks with their own name. Many people here that I want to get in. Let's get in the view from Sweden. I know you've been very patient with me. Trying to squeeze in a word. Let's get a microphone right here. Could you stand up so they can see you? Because I know Sweden, of course, has been having its own problems as of late.
We certainly have, and it's extremely challenging. We have a refugee crisis and a migration challenge. The refugee crisis is an imperative to deal with. The migration challenge is actually an opportunity, and they have to be treated very differently. The refugee crisis can be transient if we face the issues of the problems of the origin of the refugee crisis. The migration challenge is forever, and we better deal with it. Now, Jorge answered the kind of question that I wanted to raise, that I'm struck by how few politicians actually dare address the migration issue as an opportunity, when that is the truth in America, in Canada, in Europe, also in Sweden. And this we just have to offer as an opportunity to people with some guts. This is not really happening, and you might say that flies in the face of the losing middle ground in our countries, right in the middle of the refugee crisis. But economic analysis shows it, history shows it, and we just need to address it, and you said it in a more populist way. I agree with this, but let's use analysis, and let's make sure that people who are in this kind of network of dialogue actually reinforce that approach to the migration opportunity.
Jorge, you want to respond to that?
I think that it's a way of how you address the issue. In the case of Mexican immigration to the United States, I've often said that Americans can choose whether they want to pay for the education of children from Oaxaca, in Oaxaca or in Los Angeles. They can choose where they want to pay for it. They're going to pay for it anyway. So it's a lot cheaper to educate Mexican children in Mexico than in Los Angeles. The Syrian situation is not totally different in the sense that if the Germans and the Europeans and the Americans and now the Russians, like yesterday, can find a long-term solution to the Syrian crisis, that is going to be a whole of a lot less costly from every point of view than having millions and millions of Syrians eventually empty the country and all go to Germany. And the same is true for Mexico and Central America. The problem is it's very difficult to raise this issue. How many German troops is Chancellor Merkel willing to send to Syria? How many euros is she willing to spend to get somebody else to send troops, like the Americans did with the first Gulf War? Americans paid other guys to send troops, which is okay, but they had to send some troops of their own. Can't have somebody else do it all for you. The same is true for the Americans in Central America. What sense does it make for Biden to go twice? Biden has visited 2 countries in the world twice since he's been vice president. 2. Afghanistan and Guatemala. Believe me, you don't want to go to Guatemala unless you really have to. You really don't.
Okay, starting a conflict between Mexico and Guatemala today.
And the
that's
US
the result. Breaking news, Atlantic Dialogue.
Then he goes, he promises money, and he doesn't give any money. So it's ridiculous. The poor American ambassador in Guatemala City says, you know, the Guatemalans come to me and say, where's the money? And I have to tell them all sorts of stories about Congress and this, and the Republicans and the Appropriations Committee and blah, 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 blah. And he looks a little bit like a fool.
Okay. I won't ask you to revise your statement about a visit to Guatemala. I think that stands for its own. The lady right here, she's been very patient, and then I'm going to get this gentleman here right in. Many people raising their hands, not forgetting about any of you, trust me.
Just, my name's Tokumbo Ishmael from Nigeria. Just kind of going back to the mixed migration matter and what you've just said, how about before you need to send in troops? How about in, for example, African countries where it's not necessarily about crises like in Syria, but there's still a desire for people looking for better lives. How are your agencies working with the other appropriate agencies in your countries with respect to helping these developing nations make their countries on ground better places such that people don't want to risk their lives looking for the golden pot in Europe or elsewhere?
Is there anyone in particular you would like to answer?
To all of them, actually, because I just feel like there's a disconnect. There are people that are working on the cure and people that are working on the preventative measures, but maybe not necessarily in tandem.
Okay, since we're slowly running out of time, not quite yet, let's all try to be brief, get in as many people still as we can. Go ahead, Katrin.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think a lot of people think that you're absolutely right. And then the question at hand is, why don't we have more activities in the countries of origin? I think somebody yesterday said we need a whole-of-government approach to the whole issue of migration, not only refugee migration, but migration in general. And yes, very rightly so, we need to definitely step up that. I think Anna from GIZ probably is somebody who could talk a bit, if there was time, could talk about initiatives in countries of origin as part of the German sort of approach to it. But my quick answer would be this.
Anybody?
Again, yes. I mean, in the case of Mexico, we've always, since we started talking with the Americans about this issue, we've always insisted that if there aren't resources channeled to the sending regions in Mexico and now in Central America, there is no long-term solution, quote unquote, whatever that means to the situation. The problem is it's, again, very difficult to convince American taxpayers or German taxpayers to pay for things happening elsewhere when they feel that there are a lot of problems at home. And that takes a lot of courage on the part of leaders to say these things and then make the case and then get the money. The worst thing you can do is make the case and then not put up the money.
I'll try to collect a couple of questions now because it's becoming clear. We're going to take 3 questions now at a time, not from you, not all 3 of you. One question from you, please go ahead.
All right, I'm Christian Leffler from the European External Action Service. A couple of points on what's just been said. First, I have to disagree with Jorge on 2 points. First, Guatemala is actually quite a nice place to visit. I like going. Secondly, Mexico is not Syria. When you made that comparison that what the US is doing in Mexico, should you educate kids in Oaxaca or in Los Angeles, and Europe should take the same attitude to Syria. Syria is in civil war. Mexico, luckily, is not. There are problems, but they're totally different. The situation in Syria is a profound political crisis generating real political refugees. According to the Geneva Convention, all the rest of it. That means that we, and the rest of the world, we have a legal and moral obligation to take these people in. The points were made about migration earlier, which is different. That's more like the situation of the kids in Oaxaca. And there we have different means, different challenges, and, as Mats Carlson said, different opportunities. Now, one of the things that we've been trying to do, and which we are trying now to step up to do on the migration side, with the so-called Valletta conference that will happen in about a week's time, with the Europeans and all the countries of Africa, North Africa and large parts of Africa, is to see how one can address the root causes of that migration. It is an opportunity for Europe with an aging population, but at the same time, and this is one of the things that has astounded me, there was a question that came past amongst the Twitter feed. How is it that the countries of origin of the migrants across large swathes of Africa do not see this as more of a threat to their potential for economic development? Absolutely. Here are a lot of good, energetic people full of initiative who are leaving their countries, who they need for their own development. That's where, perversely, if you like, since it is an opportunity for us to, we're trying to see how we can work with these countries to offer better opportunities for the people in their own countries.
Thank you.
A last question to Ambassador, possibly. Why do you think it is that the Syrians basically all want to go to Europe via Turkey? Why do you get 450 here, which is about, whatever, two hours in a Greek island? Why do they not go to other parts of, if you like, their own cultural sphere? It's a question.
Thank you.
Can I just respond?
Yes, please, please.
I obviously must have misspoken because I tried to make a distinction between the Central American situation, which are refugees, and the Mexican situation, which is migration. There's no question that Mexico does not have a refugee issue with the United States. There is a question that the Central Americans have a refugee situation with Mexico and with the Americans. So if I didn't make that distinction, which I thought I had made, then I hope I have made it now. These are two different cases, and they're very serious, both of them. But in the case of the Central Americans, we're talking about a large number of people. We, as I said, we Mexico, deported in the last fiscal year 190,000 Central Americans, twice the amount that the Americans deported, about 90,000. This is since we began our program. It's not Syrian numbers, but it's not bad. And we're working on it to make them more. If we can we can deport more, we'll be in good shape.
Aziz, before I move on, very briefly, why aren't people coming to Morocco?
Well, I think that people, first of all, the Syrians are really going to neighboring countries. You have 1.5 million, 2 million in Turkey, you have 1.5 million in Lebanon, and you have 800,000 in Jordan. By 1,000, the numbers are 251 in Lebanon, I think 21. I looked at the numbers, 21 per 1,000 people population in Turkey. So the burden is mainly in the neighboring countries and the countries of the same culture. They don't come here because it's much easier to go through Europe than to come here. It's very difficult to get here from Syria. It's a long way, a real long way. And of course, it's much more attractive to go to Germany and the European Union. They feel that it's much more attractive in terms of economy. Now, what I So this is my answer, and then I will add a few things.
Great, sure. We're going to have closing statements in just a few minutes. Go ahead, please.
Hello, my name is Sarah and I'm Moroccan. My first question goes to Ambassador Mekouar. I absolutely agree with you on the crucial role that media have to play in facilitating the integration of immigrants and the refugees. What is Morocco doing in that area, especially for sub-Saharan migrants? And my second very quick question is for Mrs. Katrin. To me, it seems to me that for a successful integration, women are a key asset. And what are some of the programs that are focusing on women in the integration programs that Germany is doing?
Okay, before you answer that, Peter, I promise that you get a word in. Go ahead.
No journalist answered. I was a journalist for 30 years, so I want to directly answer your question from my perspective. Yes, the media have had a role in the negative views of the public across Europe, across North America, not just of this issue, but of governments generally and of big business generally. And I think there's a fundamental problem, which is that governments and big business aren't trusted on these issues, and therefore they find it much harder to pursue what most of us would regard as the correct policies. But journalists didn't invent the failure of Western policy in Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria or Libya. The media did not invent the pollution that the BP caused in Mexico or the unspeakable things that Trafigura did in Nigeria. It didn't invent the terrible behavior of the bankers leading up to the financial crisis. So yes, the media transmitted this. They didn't invent it, and until you have a much bigger strategy, ambition, to make politicians and big business more trusted, I fear that anything they say or do now to accept more immigrants, asylum seekers, refugees into their country, certainly in Europe, they will have a great deal of difficulty selling that.
Trust me, if it were up to me, we would be discussing this issue for another 90 minutes because I know how vast this topic is and how many questions have still been unanswered. I know I'm going to be the most unpopular person in the room now, but I'm going to defer the blame to this gentleman all the way there, who's been giving me the time and telling me to wrap things up. So I do want to give the panelists, of course, the opportunity to sort of bring it to a close. And many statements that have been made here throughout the past 90 minutes, I think, resonated with all of us here in the room. Can we manage? This is how we started out with the question, and this is what we want to end with. Katrin.
Yes, I will answer that question, but I think I very briefly would like to go back to that question about women. I think empowering women is a very important part of the integration process. There's no time to go into it in any detail, but we do have special language classes for women with children focusing on educational issues, which are mandatory if you have a school-age child and do not speak German, and I think the mandatory part is important. There's lots of programs about empowerment and about connecting women with school, connecting women with work. But sorry, we're running out of time, so I got to leave it at that. Closing remark. I think the people in this room are not typical in terms of how they view situations like the one we talked about. And my concern is how, as I mentioned before, how do I get to the people who have a different mindset about migration and asylum? I think language is very important. And I personally tried not to talk about a crisis because I think a crisis is not yet. This is not a crisis yet. This is a serious situation, but it's not a crisis. And I think the language people in the field choose, myself, politicians, journalists, very much has an influence on public debate and public opinion. So I think we should choose language carefully. And maybe I like to leave it at that general closing remark.
But still, Germany, of course, will be at the forefront of this issue for many years to come, and perhaps even goes to the heart of what European solidarity is.
Absolutely, and I think we do have to have an honest discourse about that on the European level as well as on the ground in the local municipalities. It's not going to be easy, but at least for now, ask me again next year, I think we will manage to do that.
Jorge, aside from the fact that the next Atlantic Dialogues will be held in Guatemala. I want to give you the opportunity, of course, to wrap things up.
Actually, I've been to Guatemala twice also the last 3 months, so. The first point I'd like to make is that really I cannot but find admirable what the German government has been doing over the past, since the summer, in relation to Europe, the rest of Europe, and in relation to other countries in the world with similar situations, not to use the word crisis. I think it's truly admirable what Chancellor Merkel has done and continues to do, and I hope that public opinion continues to support her, or that she can go forward even if public opinion does not support her, which sometimes leaders have to do. I think that we should see similar leadership in the United States and in Mexico and in other countries that face similar situations. You can't do this on the cheap, and you can't do it nicely. It's very difficult to go against the type of public opinion you're saying, but that's what leadership is. That's what I think President Obama has tried to do, in my opinion, way too late. He started way too late on immigration. He should have started way before, and he should have started with executive actions way before he did, and not only for electoral purposes, and now it's too late. And I think that we in Mexico should also have the same type of response in regard to the Central American situation that Chancellor Merkel and that President Obama have had, and we are not having it either. And I think leadership really makes the difference.
Leadership is important, and Chancellor Merkel has been mentioned many times here throughout this panel. Perhaps we should not forget that there's also a very important election coming up tomorrow in Turkey, and that, of course, will also determine in many ways how this issue will play out in the coming years. Aziz.
The young lady asked how we can use the media to reach out to people, convince them about the benefits of to welcome migrants. Well, we're talking about leadership. King Mohammed VI made a speech in 2013 that changed completely the policy of Morocco, and by giving a speech, explaining the things, he reached out through the media to the people, and I think that the people are convinced. But that's the way it works here in Morocco. I'm not saying that it can work everywhere else the same way. I would like to say, as a final statement, we are not going to stop the migration flow anytime soon, anywhere in the world. This is a reality that we have to deal with, and we will have to deal with, and all governments in the world will have to deal with in the future. So we better be prepared and not find ourselves like Europe found itself a few months ago with a situation that was predictable. So probably people should start thinking about what's going to happen and what will be the migration flows in the future and how to manage them. We were talking about, Professor Castañeda said that it's better to pay for the school in Mexico than the school in Los Angeles. Well, a lot has been said about helping the countries, developing countries, and emergent countries to develop aid, support, fine. But I think that, and I'm basing Morocco in that side of the berm, I think that we have to also put our acts together. You can train how many people, as many people as you want. You will have trained people, fine. You have to give them jobs. To give them jobs, you have to make business easy and attract investments. And that's our side and our part of the job. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Aziz. And as a television host, I've learned a long time ago that it's very beneficial to listen to your producer. When he says it's time to wrap things up, it's time to wrap things up. So in that sense, I want to heartfelt thanks to your active participation. I know that I couldn't call on many of you. I apologize, but we've had many great questions and comments throughout on the wall as well. But of course, I think we are off to a great start here. The second day kicked off with many ammunition that we can use for the following discussions. And in that, I want to thank you, of course, but most importantly, a great panel for their input. Round of applause, please, for... And I think, and with that I close, I think it's become abundantly clear that this is one of the, if not the determining critical issue of our time. Don't be surprised if we're going to have the same panel again in 2016 then in Guatemala. Enjoy. Thank you. Thank you.
Don't take much to spark you guys off, man. A couple of words and you're off and running, man. Okay.